Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Office of the Prime Minister's press briefing. We have called this special press briefing to give you, as promised, an update on the power generation issues we've been experiencing here in the capital and other areas of the Bahamas, and of course, how they're being addressed. We are pleased to be joined this morning by representatives of Bahamas Power and Light, along with representatives of Bahamas Grid Company, along with a representative from the Bahamas Department of Meteorology. During a series of presentations, which will begin shortly, we'll hear details on everything ranging from restoration efforts and the condition and transmission of distribution networks to the current heat wave and how that is also having an impact on power generation. We will begin with a presentation from Ms. Toni Pratt, the CEO of BPL. She will be followed by Mr. Anthony Christie, the Chief Operating Officer of BPL. Ryan Holder, COO of Bahamas Grid Company, will follow, followed by Siobhan Moxie Bonnaby of the Bahamas Department of Meteorology, Mr. Dario McKinsey, CEO of Bahamas Grid Company, and Ms. Christina Alston, Chair of BPL, will round out presentations. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the podium Ms. Toni Pratt, CEO of BPL.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here this morning. I would like to start by apologizing to the residents of New Providence who experienced repeated and extensive outages over the past several days. On behalf of Bahamas Power and Light Company, we do apologize for the inconvenience that you did experience. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the hard-working teams of Bahamas Power and Light who worked in conjunction with teams from Bahamas Grid Company to effect repairs, sometimes working 48 hours nonstop. We know that it was a mammoth task. It was a lot of work that needed to be completed, and we do understand the frustrations that residents experienced, especially at this very, very hot summer that we're having at this time. One of the things that you will hear about later is that Bahamas Grid Company is responsible for the transmission and distribution network. BPL is responsible for providing the generation, which means that we maintain and operate the Blue Hills Power Station plant in New Providence, as well as the Clifton Pier Power Station plant in New Providence. We have the CEO and COO of BGC here who will provide you further updates as it relates to the ongoing work on the T&D network. With that being said, I will hand over now to COO, who will give you a more comprehensive operational update. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to give you an update on the status of generation and the circuits on New Providence, as well as a little bit on the Family Island side. And as the CEO mentioned, I'd like to thank our staff and the partners who we work with and people in Grand Bahama who have supported us, as well as even recently we got support from JPS to help us through the challenges that we're facing as we go through this summer. So as it stands now, New Providence would have enough generation capacity to meet the demand as it is. We do expect increasing loads as we approach the end of August and as schools start to open in September. So again, we're bracing ourselves and preparing to ensure that we have the generation capacity available. And as note, we've had some challenges the last week or so. We've had some incidents beyond our control. We've had a lot of cable faults and issues that we had to address immediately, and we did an excellent job in trying to restore as soon as we can. And the key is we did it safely. So, but in doing that, it would take time to restore. So we encourage our team members to continue to work safely in the situations that they are in order to help restore power to all of our customers. So as stated or as noted, last week we had an issue over the weekend in the Windsor Field or Western New Providence area. That issue was resolved, I think, around 7 p.m. on Sunday. So all those customers who would have been experiencing load shedding was fully restored. So there's no load shedding program currently in progress, and we don't expect any for the course of the day, or hopefully none too soon. In addition, the issue with the transformers that occurred early in the week at Blue Hills Power Station, those transformers were returned to service, and all those customers in the southern New Providence area were restored, and we should have no issue in that area moving forward as well. So that's the condition with those major outages that occurred last week. Presently today, we do have a cable fault in a few areas on West Bay Street near Sapadilla. We've identified another cable fault, and I just passed the teams. They're there now excavating. And again, these cable faults, they cannot be repaired instantly. They take some time. So we estimate about 8 to 10 hours. If all the conditions are right, everything is in place, they can proceed and then safely conduct those repairs. We also have an issue on East Bay Street that is impacting the Union Wharf area, and an emergency issue we just realized is happening at the Marathon Mall area. And again, we may have a few minor incidents or isolated incidents, individual customers here and there, and that's the nature of our business. So once these things are reported, identified, we send teams out and they address those as quickly as possible. So right now, we have plans to continue repairs. BGC can speak to a lot more on the circuits across New Providence that are going to be repaired. And as I mentioned before, we had to fly in and we got resources out of Jamaica to help us with fixing some of these cable faults, and that happened through coordination with the Office of the PM, the CEO, and others who were involved, and we'd like to thank them for their efforts in order to get some much-needed materials to expedite that and get that air on the ground. So now the teams are ready to go and again repair some faults that exist that would help us with the loading and on the system. So that's where we stand today, and again, each day we work to restore, we work to ensure that we maintain complete power for all the customers on New Providence. Good.
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, we also have representatives from Bahamas Grid Company. Right now, I'd like to welcome to the podium Mr. Ryan Holder, COO.
Good morning, everybody. So it's been about a month and a half since I've entered into this role, and from my observation of the network, there's a clear split between the foundational transmission work that took place. That work's been completed and is performing well, right? While the legacy distribution and substation layers of the system are not performing properly, right? That's because we inherited a system that didn't have proper prior reinvestment. So that creates challenges in terms of the age of the system and its ability to carry power effectively and reliably. So at Bahamas Grid, we have a NRA strategy, which is normalize, reconfigure, and add to the system, which my CEO would speak to later on, which we use to govern how we approach the repair of the network. So instead of a reactive approach, this is more so of a sequence and resource way of tackling the challenge that we have ahead of us. So on the transmission side, as I mentioned earlier, the foundational 132 kV transmission substations and transmission line work has substantially been completed, and this forms a structural backbone for the network, allowing power to be transmitted from BPL's generation stations to the load centers in the province. Right? This backbone improves reliability for the overall transmission network, and now allows us the flexibility to be able to focus on the sublayers, which is the sub-transmission voltage, which is at the 33 kV and the 11 kV, 7.2 kV networks below, which require major work, because as I mentioned before, these networks have components which are extremely old, right, especially on the underground side. So part of the foundational work, there were interrupters or smart recloser switches that were installed. That has greatly improved some of the reliability in the overhead portions of the network, right? However, the underground cabling is where the challenges lie. They're susceptible to lightning strikes hitting the ground and water penetration, which causes the failures, right? So in addition to the cabling issue at the sub-transmission level, there are substation switchgear and transformer issues that also have to be addressed. These are also old components which have issues in terms of oil leakage and stuff. So it's a part of our focus in terms of our reliability efforts to improve reliability to tackle upgrading this equipment. In addition to that, part of the part of the old, the nature of the switchgear and the transformer infrastructure is that it wasn't smart. There was an ability for visibility in terms of SCADA, automated supervisory control, and data acquisition. So we don't have visibility on a lot of the old switchgear. So part of the proposed works coming ahead is to add that type of visibility to the system so that there's awareness as to where outages are occurring, what loading conditions are, and to allow smarter decisions to be made in terms of actually managing the grid. So moving on in terms of our feeder restoration program, our idea is to now look at, once we're completing a system modeling study to get a better appreciation for actually where loading lies on the network, and to understand how the network's going to perform and behave as more solar comes on, more independent power produced generators come on, and they pump energy into the system. We have to model the network and understand how it's going to behave to allow us to actually manage and control it better. It also identifies opportunities for us to install additional feeder supports and additional equipment in terms of reclosers and transformer capacity, right? So as the study, which we hope to have completed within the next month to two, right, then we'll be able to move into the capital phase of our expansion program in terms of being able to put the feeder capacity in place that's going to help initially by reducing outage duration and then actually reducing the number of outages that occur. Finally, I'd like to speak about just our switching operations and the coordination that we're currently having with BPL. Right, I've been here for a short time, but in that's the roughly 6 weeks or so, I've seen a marked difference in terms of the interaction between the two organizations and the cooperation that's happening. It's trending in the right direction, and we hope to continue to make that type of progress as we work together in terms of being able to better to deliver a more reliable grid and better service to the public. One aspect we also notice in terms of what we think the public can assist on as well. We have noticed a trend in terms of a number of these faults are being caused because of system overloads, and there are a number of unsanctioned connections on the network, right? As unsanctioned connections are on the network, these additional load which there's no visibility on, all right? So part of that is we'd like, this is in which an unsanctioned connection is which, for instance, your house may have a 100 amp supply, you want to add additional air conditioning load, your electrician, instead of actually going through the process of the Ministry of Works, just actually upgrades your network and to add your additional air conditioning. That adds additional load which is not visible to the utility company, right? And that creates problems in terms of overloads in the system. There's an opportunity for everybody to actually do their part in terms of actually following the approval process. It's not just an issue of load, but it's also a safety risk when things happen outside the system in that manner. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holder. Now, most of us in this room are old enough to be aware of the legacy issues that BPL has been experiencing. We are also aware of the ongoing upgrades being undertaken by the Davis administration to overhaul and upgrade the system. What we haven't talked about so much in this conversation is how the weather and changes to the weather, the heat waves in particular, are impacting power generation, not capacity, but power generation itself. We're happy to be joined by Ms. Siobhan Moxie Barnaby of the Bahamas Department of Meteorology, who will discuss that aspect. Ms. Moxie Barnaby.
Good morning to all. For the past 2 to 3 months, we have been experiencing slightly higher than normal temperatures across the archipelago of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and particularly the northern and northwest Bahamas. That area is split a dividing line across Exuma, South Andros coming northward. Those islands have been experiencing higher than normal temperatures. And those has prompted us to issue heat advisory across the country for the most part. And when we issue a heat advisory, in essence, what we're saying is that the potential exists for excessive heat that can potentially lead to dangerous conditions for the public. And this heat advisory that we issue is based on the heat index. The heat index, as most of us would know, is how you feel. When you feel a temperature, what it feels like. And that is a measure of both the air temperature itself and the relative humidity. Now, we are islands, so surrounded by water, and that keeps our relative humidity pretty high. And that can lead to a lot of discomfort, and hence the heat index, for the most part, whether it's day or night, will feel higher across our bodies. We issue advisories when the heat index is 102 degrees Fahrenheit during the day and greater than 77 degrees Fahrenheit at night. And when we talk about a heat wave, we are talking about conditions where you have the heat index for at least 3 or more days being those values. With that being said, when we have excessive heat, that can not only impact us health-wise, but obviously we need to cool ourselves down, and that will put the load on the electrical power company. For the month of June, we were running at nighttime almost 80% higher for temperatures across New Providence and most of the northern Bahamas. And similarly, during the day, it was about 68 degrees Fahrenheit or more, 68% or higher during the daytime above normal. For July, similar numbers are also reported, with about 80% of nighttime temperatures being above normal and 75% of daytime temperature being above normal. As we look ahead into August, the likelihood of above normal temperature, unfortunately, continues for both August and September. For the Northwest Bahamas, in which New Providence is a part, we are looking at greater than 80% likelihood of above normal temperature for both August and September. And for the Northern Bahamas, which is Grand Bahama and Abaco and those islands, we are looking at about 70% or higher in terms of above normal temperature. So, like I said before, with regard to the comfort of the Bahamian people, we will tap into air conditioning and anything to keep us cool, and that will definitely put some measure of pressure on the electrical companies. So as we go ahead into not only the start of the active part of the hurricane season, but also what is our most hottest month in the year, we do anticipate, like I said, above normal temperature. And so hopefully, things can improve in terms of coolness. In the Department of Meteorology, we're not immune to power outage. We've experienced it over the weekend like most other businesses. And at one point, our backup generator sort of didn't kick in, so we literally had to had a no-time send out to close the airport because we couldn't transmit any vital weather data. So these things impact us, who delivers the weather, as well as the Bahamian people at large. So I hope that gives some clarity in terms of weather. Right now, we do have our heat wave forecast out, but those are for the central and southeast Bahamas. But like I said, as we move further down into the month of August, because this is our generally warmest month of the year, like I said, we anticipate at least an 80% chance of higher than normal temperature for the rest of this month and as we move through to September. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moxie Bonamy. I'd now like to welcome Mr. Dario McKenzie, CEO of Bahamas Grid Company, BGC.
Good morning, all. I would be remiss if I didn't also take a minute to say thank you to the hardworking men and women of BPL, as well as Bahamas Grid, as well as our strategic partners, who's helped us to respond to the number of outages that we've been experiencing on New Providence. These individuals, to me, they're like heroes because many of them also come from homes that was without electricity themselves. And so I really want to acknowledge them and thank them for their long hours in helping to maintain and to restore the service on the grid. I think there are three things I would like to touch on this morning. First, let's start with a system overview. Much of what has been said is, one, to add additional clarity in regards to the point of delineation between BPL and Bahamas Grid. So BPL is responsible for the generation, the production of power. BGC, we're responsible for the transmission and distribution system. And the electric distribution system is very complex, consisting of systems connected to systems, which must be fully optimized in order to deliver reliable and resilient service to our consumers. And between each of those points of transmission, you have very critical and complex equipment, switch gears, transformers, breakers, and the likes. And so much of what also has been said this morning, we have an aging infrastructure, a system that we've inherited that essentially evolved from a hodgepodge of independent system over the past 50 to 60 years. And so now we have that system where it's essentially a 20th century system that's being faced with 21st century load demands and requirements. I've been now in this position for approximately 3 months, and it's good to be back home. But as I drive around the island, one of the things that I notice is how the rate of transition or adoption of electric vehicles, right? The different loads that we typically have in our homes, the big screen TV and so forth and so on. And so by all definition, we are a 21st century type consumer load profile, right? But again, we're plagued with having to put that strain on a dated system that needs much repair. So in New Providence, the system, as I would say, is more complex than you would typically find elsewhere. Even our load characteristics are unique. In most systems, as you go around the world, what you would see is what's commonly referred to as a single peak load profile, right? Where the load will potentially peak between 3 and 4 p.m. and continue at 9 to 10 p.m. and then come down. We're very unique in New Providence. We have a double peak. The load goes up at around 3 p.m., probably starts to come down around 9, and then it goes back up again, forming a double hump. What does that mean? It means that the system is under constant strain. There's very little relief in terms of load. And I say this to point it out because in order to maintain the system reliability, we really do need the public's support and assistance. So in short, this is a public appeal, right? Conserve load where you can. Mr. Holder also talked about unreported or unauthorized connected loads, right? There's a reason why we have processes in place where you ought to report when you're connecting a new EV charger, right? That's a substantial drain, and that's unseen to the system operators. So in short, what I'm saying is we're appealing to the public at large to assist us with curtailing load, especially during peak period. We have a very beautiful island, right? Constant breeze. Sometimes it may be not a bad thing. I know I do it. I go out and I sit on the beach and enjoy what this beautiful island has to offer. But to each his own. And it does not override our sacred responsibility to the consumers, which is to provide safe, reliable, and resilient service. And that is the goal and that is the mission of the Bahamas Grid Company. And we will continue to pursue that. The next thing I want to talk about is, as I move through the island and I engage with a lot of our consumers, the main question that they have, that they ask me is, what are we doing? What are we doing to improve the system? And the answer that I typically give to them is the following. We're continuing to build on the foundational project that we started approximately 2.5 years ago, where we install miles and miles of fiber optic cable, which will then go to support our supervisory control and data acquisition system. Some will just simply call it SCADA system, our SCADA system. It provides the communication backbone in which we can monitor, control our critical and vital system assets. We're continuing to build on the foundational projects. The 41 interrupters that we installed, the approximately 300 new poles that we installed as well, and numerous overhead transformers. And most notably are the 3 132 substations that we recently completed, which will have a tremendous improvement in terms of asset to the transmission system. And so when I talked about the system earlier, I talked about the system, the electrical system being systems connected to system. Each one of those systems need to be optimized. We've come a long way in terms of the generation side of that system. And now we're faced with refocusing our capital dollars and our attention on the transmission and distribution system. We've started that 2 years ago. That's indicative or indicated by the areas of the substations that we built, those 3 substations, the miles and miles of transmission lines that we've installed throughout New Providence. And we will continue that work. And so our overall strategy going forward, our go forward system improvement strategy can be summed up in a 3-letter acronym, NRA, where the N stands for normalizing the system by aggressively repairing system faults. And the R is to reconfigure. So there are some opportunities within our transmission and distribution system where we can reconfigure it to make sure it's in a more optimal state to deliver energy. Relocate assets as needed. There are some substations where we may have slightly underutilized assets, so we will be looking to relocate those assets from one station to the other. And the A stands for adding additional equipment, circuits to the system, and new technology that will improve system reliability and control. So at a very high level, that is the strategy. But a strategy without tactics is nothing, right? So permit me, if you will, for us to go over some of the tactics that we plan to employ in the upcoming months to ensure that we fulfill our commitment and our promise to our consumers. The first strategy, or the first tactic, I should say, is to put safety first. So safety is of the primary utmost importance to us. Safety to our linemen, our linewomen, and of course to the public. So in everything that we approach and we apply, we're going to make sure that we lead with safety first. Also, a critical component to our overall tactic is to make sure that we're improving continuously by making sure our workforce are exposed to and adopt the best in industry standards, and that we give them the training that are needed to maintain those standards of excellence in terms of operational excellence. 3, we want to continue to make the necessary financial investments by putting back into the grid. But we want to do it in such a way where it's data-driven. And so we go back to what I talked about earlier, which is the updating the system, modernizing the grid by adding more command and control SCADA systems. And the other part of that is to also, we're actively engaged right now with a engineering services company where they will be building out what's called a digital model of the system. So once we have that digital model of the system, that will serve as the platform for us to do more data-driven investments back into the system, where we're prioritizing faulted feeders, where we are prioritizing feeders based on their potential to have or develop a fault. And we're also, as part of the overall tactic here, is we are being proactive. We're being also very proactive. Some of the proactive things that we've done to date, I would have mentioned the works that we did over the past 2 years, but we're now taking a proactive approach to identifying faults before they occur by doing a infrared scan of the network, of our substations, as well as our transmission lines. And so that's a very critical steps into identifying faults so that we can schedule them for repair in a way whereby it minimizes the impact on our consumers. Other proactive steps that we're taking is we're looking at some of the root cause analysis data, especially when it comes to our switchgears. We have seen a certain trend where there's a propensity to have failures at a certain spot in those switchgear equipment. Be it all said, those equipment, they're very old, but in order to extend their use and usefulness, we're also we're also retrofitting them or improving them in the field by adding a insulation protective coating to prevent arc fault failure from occurring within those switchgears. So there are a number of proactive steps that we're doing, and I'm sure as the press corps, you're probably going to have more questions around that, and I'll be happy to answer. But from that system modeling impact that I talked about, that we're engaging the engineering service to do, that is going to serve as the foundation in order for us to develop a 5-year capital program. And what that looks like, what that will entail is the reinvestment of millions of dollars on an annual basis to improve and to maintain the system. And so with that said, I think I would want to close by saying the work continues and the work goes on. BGC, we are you are us. We are not only employees within a utility company, but we are also consumers. And so we do feel the pain, and we are committed to improving the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKenzie. The work continues. I think that's a great way to sum it up, because in addition to the maintenance work that's ongoing to make sure the lights go on, there's a major plan for the future of BPL. And to speak about what that future will look like in terms of the infrastructure, the 21st century grid, I'd like to welcome Ms. Christina Alston, Chair of BPL.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming this morning to the presentations. I'd just like to thank the CEO and COO of BPL, and also the CEO and COO of Bahamas Grid for coming this morning. But I'd also like to thank meteorology for coming. The words that meteorology gave us today, very important. One of the things that I myself have been doing is watching systems globally to understand the impacts of the weather on the systems. And sometimes when we talk about what's happening in other parts of the world, we're like, well, what does that mean to us? And what we're seeing is cities with very complex networks like our own failing under these types of conditions. Paris went out of power most recently. The entire city shut down. Detroit Edison experienced an outage for 7 days with the same type of cable faults that we are seeing. And so what does that mean for us? What that means is we can take the information that they are putting out to the professional organizations and see what that means in terms of the implementation for ourselves. So I think it's very important to understand that we are not in this just the Bahamas in terms of this heat wave, but the fact that our circuits are performing in the same way that the circuits in the United States are performing under these types of thermal conditions is very important. And it's a learning experience for all of us who are electrical engineers in the utility space. But what I want to talk to you about is something that CEO McKenzie spoke about, which is how we need to move into a 21st grid, where right now what we have is a 20th century grid. We have a very dynamic system here in the Bahamas. We as Bahamians are probably the most energy intensive country in the Caribbean. We are proud to sit at a 98% electrification rate when other countries are still trying to reach their rural communities. And that is something that, although is a challenge, is definitely something we should be proud of. We tend to use a lot of energy. We just do. We have a lot of air conditioning load, which is very dynamic. Everybody have a deep freezer. Everybody got a refrigerator. We are very energy intensive. So how do we prepare for this 21st grid? So that's one of the things I want to talk to you about. Some of you may recall that BPL entered into an agreement with the IDB for a $90 million loan. And that loan was specifically geared towards our grid modernization program. That grid modernization program is specifically designed to modernize our grid in terms of communication. CEO McKenzie mentioned to you all about SCADA. He spelled it all out, supervisory control. We just call it SCADA. But right now, we have teams on the ground who are actually going out and they are dropping the GIS, the Geographic Information Systems. They are getting the coordinates for every single consumer in the Bahamas. We have put out notifications when they're in your area, and those GIS coordinates are actually building out our entire digital platform. The reason that's so important is what we would like to do, and what we're going to be doing in the future, is we will know when you are out of power. You don't have to call us, we'll know. We are building on the SCADA and the AMI and the GIS to put in an advanced outage management system. So for consumers now, we will know when you're out. You don't need to call us, and that's a world that we want to sit in. We want to sit in a world where we can use the SCADA to get the most consumers on in the shortest amount of time. This type of grid modernization is where we as a country need to be. We need to be able to communicate two-way fashion with our consumers, let them know that we know that they're out, give them information in real time, give them control over their usage, but also when we have isolated instances of outages, like we've seen where we turn on an entire area and maybe one or two persons are out, and they're assuming that everyone else is still out and it's taking us a long time to get that communication. That will be a thing of the past. And so that's where we are heading, and that work is actually going on as we speak. So this grid modernization that we're taking on is a twofold process. One of the things you would have heard today is talk about conservation. Last week when we were here, one of the things that we immediately recognized with these, with the circuits that we call them, that's the lines that feed you, we noticed quite quickly that some of them, as they were reaching their peak, how much they could actually support, we put out a call to the government agencies and we asked them to conserve energy. If they could cut back on their air conditioning, we thought we would get enough relief in the system to get more residential consumers and small businesses online. And it was very successful. The loads immediately dropped. As soon as we put out the call and they understood, the government agencies understood what we were asking, that conservation technique immediately took load off of the entire grid. That is something that we are going to start making as a permanent attribution to the government agencies. And we're going to work very closely with them because we want to make sure that it doesn't need to be as cold as it is in the buildings. We even talk to them about subroutines, meaning before persons come to work in the morning, we can do a pre-cool as opposed to cooling overnight. CEO McKenzie mentioned that we have 2 system peaks. That would definitely help with that second evening peak, because we're not getting the temperature differential that we used to have between daytime and nighttime peak is no longer there. Where we used to go to bed and it was 85, 90 degrees, and you wake up and it's a cool 70 degrees and you're on your porch having coffee, we don't have that. You go to bed, it's 90 degrees, you wake up, it's 87 degrees. And because we're not getting that differential anymore, that system peak is staying with us. And so having government agencies participate with us in energy conservation will give us the breathing room to complete our work. But that work doesn't stop there. Conservation is something that we can all participate in. Energy conservation has been around since the 80s. Many of us may have even gone ahead and changed out the lighting in our homes to LEDs. And to put that in perspective, for every 3 watts of light that you have, that is equal to 1 watt of air conditioning. And that's a very simple calculation for you to see how there's a correlation between the amount of heat that a light may produce and how much heat needs to be removed by your air conditioning. And so conservation goes beyond just asking the government agencies. Conservation is something that each of us can do in our homes. BPL will be starting energy audits in the middle of this month for consumers, and that's an exciting program launched with the ministry. But these conservation efforts, they assist us with not only balancing the load, but they also assist the consumer in controlling how they use their load. And so those conservation programs are very important. The one thing that I would like to say, and I think this is very important, BBL and BGC are companies that are here to serve the Bahamian public. We are persons who are working out in the heat of the day to try and get the lights back on. And we are trying to do it in the safest way possible. To stand here and tell you how proud I am of the teams and all of the work that they've done over the last week would be an understatement. Because I myself grew up as a grunt, digging back lot lines as a distribution engineer, and I know how hard it is to be working in the middle of the summer when you yourself get to the point of fatigue, but you're still pushing through because you know that consumers are relying on you to get the lights on. And so to all of my teams out there, I want to say thank you. I want to tell you how proud I am that I am of all of you out there working, and that in the future, when this grid modernization comes, it will not only make your lives better, but the lives of the Bahamian people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to all the presenters for those very thorough presentations, which leads us to our question and answer period. So the floor is now open. Questions, please.
Hi.
Okay, so in regards to workers, a while ago we were told that no BPL workers agreed to be seconded to BGC. Has this impacted the availability of skilled workers for BGC? And also, given this along with Pike's exit, who are BGC's line workers and are there enough of them?
Thank you for the question. So in terms of human resources and human capital, that continues to be a challenge for BGC. Our main source of recruitment has been BTVI. We've partnered with them. We had a huge job fair where we've actually hired a number of people through that particular pipeline. We're also posting our vacancies and openings within the newspaper, on our website, LinkedIn, and all those different channels. Now, who are the employees of BGC? The employees of BGC, many of them are expert employees that came over from BPL. Some of them actually came out of retirement to join the company, to join the mission, and to take up the mantle. But with that said, BGC is not only just our employees, right? We have an augmented workforce as we continue to ramp up to get to the numbers where we need to get to. So augmented in terms of utilization by local contractors to help us in the execution of our duties and our responsibilities, such as streetlight repairs, fault repairs, vegetation management, customer service connection, and the likes. So we are a growing company, and we continue to ramp up, and we are looking for folks not only from BPL, but anyone who's technically inclined to join us at BGC.
Are you able to say how many TND staff you currently have and how much you need?
So our target goal is to reach somewhere between 160 and 180. Currently, T&D staff, we're roughly at 100. Now, not all 100 are dedicated to line work, and I think that's perhaps the crux of your question. So I would say approximately 80%, so around 60 to 80 people that are focused on actual line work. And like I said, that is combined with contracted resources. And so by doing it that way, we can ramp up and scale up as we onboard and train more BGC line workers and personnel, then we can go down on contracted forces and make the adjustments needed.
And would you say that challenge with the staffing, would that also be impacting the current state of the grid?
No, not really, right? So the resources are there. Like I said, we have a number of resources that we can utilize and bring to bear. BPL being one of them, as we've seen over this weekend, and contracted forces as well as our own BGC resources that we have.
Now today we've heard a lot about aging infrastructure and above normal temperatures, but we've always known the infrastructure was aging, and we've heard above normal, but we haven't heard record-breaking temps. So my question is, when BPL officials said that they were ready for summer, what did they mean, considering we always knew it was going to be hot this summer, and we always knew the infrastructure was old?
Yeah. Well, your question asks, what did BPL mean? I can't really speak to BPL, so if someone from BPL wants to come and if you're citing or quoting someone directly, then I can't really speak on their behalf.
All right, so every year we plan for summer peak in the loading, right? So we do our forecasting, we look at what the expected temperatures are or would be. And as we stated already, we didn't expect these high temperatures sustained for a number of days or weeks, et cetera, even at night. So that has added to the load we've seen, and it's added to the issues we've been having on the grid. So our summer readiness plan always speaks to generation capacity, materials for the impacts of storm and how fast we can restore, et cetera. But based on abnormal conditions, we're seeing higher loads, higher temperatures, higher and more frequent failures on equipment, et cetera. So that's now straining a lot of our resources that we did not really anticipate would be needed at this level. So again, we're experiencing things, we're again addressing them in the timely fashion, and again, we're ensuring that it doesn't happen again, or we're able to perform with more materials, more resources in order to restore. And again, as we improve the grid, we'll alleviate a lot of these challenges that we're seeing now. So again, we're in the storm season. We are preparing our teams across Nassau, New Providence, and the Family Islands in order to make sure that if we are impacted and any challenges occur, and again, we're going to leverage resources from Grand Bahama, from the Caribbean regions, et cetera, if something really happens. So again, we cannot say exactly, we cannot say nothing will happen, no outages will occur, they will occur. But how we address them in a timely fashion is key, and how safely we do it as well.
Now, it's all fine and good to say conserve energy, right? But what do you say to someone who says their typical light bill is something a month, all of a sudden this month they get a $600 bill, that they spend the entire holiday weekend in heat? Like, what do you say to that person who's just frustrated, who's emptying their freezer, their fridge, kids sweating at night? Like, they don't want to hear conserve your energy. Like, what can you say to those people?
Well, I can say we're working to improve this, right? Now, everyone wants their power on all the time, but things happen that are not in our control. But again, we address them and we restore as quickly as we can. outages happen. We hope they're shorter. We have metrics or KPIs in which we track this, and this is across the world. They have KPIs for tracking outages, interruptions, etc. We're trying to get us to that normal state where we're within industry standards per se. But again, we're working toward that. But again, everyone is frustrated. They don't want the light to never go off. But that's not the reality. The light will go off. The power will go off. There will be an issue, a challenge that has to be addressed. But again, we're trying to shorten the outages to lessen the impact. And again, we appreciate the public's, well, you know, we're all a part of it. We're customers as well. So again, this is something we're working to improve as we get through this summer and look toward the next summer, et cetera.
And based on your earlier statements, can we expect fewer power outages going forward, with the exception of the 2 areas you mentioned that we're having issues today?
I cannot guarantee that. I can say we're increasing. We're going into the summer months. It's going to get hotter. In August and September, we're going to see higher loads. So we're trying to do certain things now to improve feeders that have been offline for a while that would help some of the loading on the system. So we hopefully that will relieve and reduce some of the outages that we're seeing. But again, I cannot predict and guarantee that we won't have issues moving into the hotter, more demanding months as we approach August and into September.
With two organizations working together, BGC and BPL, why the need to seek extra resources from Jamaica?
No, the issue I mentioned with that is a material issue. We did not have the materials available. A lot of equipment and needs across the region on the T&D long lead time items. Some may not be available. We may have exhausted our supply, so we reached out for support of materials. But we are partnered with Carolec, so if there are storm conditions and issues that occur that, you know, cause the need for more resources, manpower to be called in, we would reach out to them. We have done the same. We sent about 2 or 3 teams to Jamaica since the last hurricane that hit them. And our teams were there for a month or more assisting them. So this is where we leverage resources, and we've reached out to GB Power for input as well. So that's where all sister utilities support each other during this type of summers.
So is it safe to say BPL is not summer ready?
I wouldn't say that. I say we're experiencing challenges and we are addressing them as they present themselves. But summer readiness is, again, we cannot say we're summer ready and there won't be any issue. That's not how that works. So if you're gonna.
Let me go ahead and because I think we like to say the gotcha moment. Got BPL, we got them. The fact of the matter is, I want everyone to hear me on this. This is one of the most complex systems in the Caribbean. We have a Class B substation that we just brought online. We have 132 kV lines. We have 33 kV underground cables, which are unheard of in the Caribbean. The fact that we were able to reach out and get materials in a timely fashion speaks to our relationship within the Caribbean. This is not unusual for us to have where one utility needs something from another utility. Utilities do this and support each other all the time. They do it in the US under mutual agreements. We do it here. BPL, in terms of summer readiness, had gone through the system. We had looked at everything. We had made sure that the generation was online in New Providence. That is a part of our summer readiness. However, saying that and saying that the system is going to be on 100% of the time, that is a very unrealistic goal. No system is 100% of the time. Your car doesn't work 100% of the time. Nothing mechanical or electrical works 100% of the time. But what we have done is systematically gone through and mitigated where we could see problems occurring. And that's the important thing to note, this mitigation. This is why we plan. We look to see where the opportunities for failures. With respect to what we're seeing now in terms of the underground cabling, this cable is in the ground. It has reached what we call its thermal limit. One of the things that meteorology said is there's no temperature differential anymore. The cables are actually in the ground, under soil, under asphalt, and they are just baking. And we are seeing where problems are arising, and we fix them. They are difficult to find. We just had an accident on Shirley Street, yesterday, where someone hit an overhead line. We were able to fix that very quickly. But these underground systems are much more difficult to locate. Once we have to locate them, we got to excavate them. Then we excavate, then we find it, then we cut it out, then we fix it, then we test it, then we balance it. These things don't happen in a matter of moments. And it is just not the best thing to say, well, were you summer ready? Yes. BPL was absolutely summer ready in terms of making sure that we had sufficient generation, that we had modeled the system, that we were looking for all opportunities that we could to where we needed to mitigate. We did. We worked very closely with BGC, and the two companies together we have meetings now. Is it every week now? Every week. This system that we have is aging in the ground, yes. And we're doing everything we can to mitigate that. You heard CEO McKenzie say that they're putting in a very aggressive construction work plan to make sure that anything that we identify this summer, that we start to go ahead and fix it. But every joint in the system can also be a point of failure, and we're watching those very closely. So when we talk about conservation, what we're asking is if we can take some pressure off of those cables, that gives us some breathing room and some mitigation techniques so that we can get past some of the hottest parts of summer by keeping all of the electricity on. So when the cooler times come, we can go in and find things and mitigate for the next year. That's what we do as engineers. We come in, we figure out what's wrong, and we come up with a plan of action to fix it. And this summer has been very difficult on everyone. It's been difficult on all of our customers. No one at BPL wants customers to be off. And we're working very hard and very diligently to try and get consumers back on. What we say to consumers is, we understand that you're upset and frustrated, and it's very bothersome to me, I know as chairman, for people to be off, because I'm also upset and frustrated because I don't want any consumer off. I want all of us to enjoy the benefits of having electricity and living in an electrified country. That is the goal. And the goal is to make sure that we provide that power reliably, but to keep our teams safe at the same time. And so sometimes we do have to just take a breath when we realize that our human capital, which is our people, are being, they want to get you back on, they want to get you back on. And in that moment in time, we sometimes just need to take a breath to make sure that they still maintain that safety must come first. And so to the consumers out there, it goes beyond saying that we apologize. We are sincerely apologetic to the fact that we never would have wanted any consumer, no matter where they are in the Bahamas, to be without power. That, in a country that is as electrified and depends on electricity as much as we do, that is not the position that we want to be in the middle of summer. And so when we talk about conservation, all we're asking is if you conserve a little bit, it allows everybody to be on the grid. You make a little bit of a sacrifice, you turn your AC from 72 to 76, even though if you think it doesn't make a big difference or you're a little bit more warm, you turn on your fan, it makes a huge difference if 100 people do that. Because that now gives us the breathing room in the grid to let 25 more people experience electricity. So if we're all using energy in a way that is conserving energy where we can, and that was one of the reasons we asked the government to participate, it really makes a big difference. We immediately saw relief on the grid when the government agencies came offline. It was very immediate because electricity moves at the speed of light. And so anything that persons can do to conserve energy, it does help, and it makes a big difference, and it gives us the breathing room in the system to have energy for everyone. And that's what energy conservation is all about.
Part of what BGC is doing is making this complicated grid you're talking about a little less complicated? Because it'll always be complicated, right?
It's always going to be complicated, but the way we communicate with the grid and the way the grid communicates to us is what makes that digitization so important. Imagine a grid that tells us, hey, there's a problem here. If you heard CEO McKenzie said, right now we're using infrared technology to tell us where hotspots are, which is a potential failure point. So then we can actually address that hotspot before it creates a long-term outage. We just did the same thing in Eleuthera. We found like 8 or 9 hotspots that we were able to address before there was a system failure. A grid as modern as this needs to be able to have two-way communication. The grid needs to be able to communicate to us, and we need to be able to communicate to the grid. The other part then is where we can open up and close circuits in real time to balance the load in real time so that we can keep the most consumers on. Because at the end of the day, our goal as a utility, we have 2 goals. That is to shorten the duration of outages and shorten the frequency of outages. That's the only goals we have. We want to make sure that the duration is shorter and the frequency is shorter. And that's every utility. No matter what utility you go to in the world, they tell you the same thing. Shorter duration, shorter frequency.
Do you know why it was built complicated?
Why it was built complicated? Because Bahamians like their AC. Listen, Bahamians, we as Bahamians, we are very energy intensive. And the other part is we're not connected. Any grid of this side is usually connected to another grid for support. We're an island. We don't have the ability to connect to another grid. So we either went ahead and, as we say, teched up, or we would have disappointed you even further by not being in a position where we have sufficient generation. So it's a complex grid, mainly because we don't have the ability to connect to another grid for support.
I'll take 2 more questions. We're well over an hour. 2 more questions from reporters who haven't asked a question yet. Jay?
Yes. Mine was for BPL. Someone from BPL.
Okay, go ahead with the question.
Realistically, in terms of customers conserving energy, how much does BPL expect them to do that, considering that we just heard from the meteorology department that we're gonna have even more hotter summers?
So I think that's an excellent point. You know, for our commercial customers or governmental agencies, we at BPL on the grid, because we saw such a significant decrease in load from the governmental agencies, but there are small things that you can do as a homeowner. One of the easiest things as homeowners can do is just turn off the lights when not in use. You'd be surprised at how much people don't do that. Or a lot of persons don't even turn off their air conditioning when they leave the home. These are very small and simple things. Weather stripping is a big thing. We know that. I always tell people, if I come to your home and I can feel the AC on my toes before you open the door, your weather stripping is not in a place where it's allowing the air conditioning to leave. All of these things help. I know it seems very small. If you have a pool, actually putting your pool pump where it cycles on the off-peak hours is very helpful. If you have an EV, going ahead and taking the EV and charging the EV during the outside of our peak is also very helpful. When we think about conservation, it's the little things that add up, because it's not just you or me conserving, it's all of us. Weather stripping is a big thing. I just had to redo the weather stripping on my refrigerator because it wasn't closing properly. And I saw a significant decrease in my bill because I didn't realize how much it was actually, the motor was actually running. A lot of things, it's just maintenance, maintaining what you have, changing out light bulbs, putting things on timers. Pool pumps is a big one. I don't think we realize how much energy pool pumps actually put on the grid, but they do. But these are things that help you as the consumer also in terms of what your home KWH, which is how we do the billing. And conservation is not a new concept. Conservation has been going on since the 80s. And the reason you have when you buy a new appliance, it tells you how much the dollars you're saving. All of that came out of the conservation programs. And so when we're asking people to conserve energy, it's not to be like a penalty or anything. We have a promo out that tells us if you put your air conditioning on 16 degrees Celsius, you're never going to get there. Because remember, air conditioning does not cool your space. Air conditioning is actually removing heat from your space. And it doesn't get cooler quicker. So there's lots of things that you as a consumer can do to conserve energy.
If I could just add to what Madam Chair said, right? So if things
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I could just add to what Madam Chair just shared in terms of conservation, because we don't want the message to be misinterpreted. We're not saying do without. We're not saying do without your air condition or the luxuries of your home. Enjoy them. All we're saying is conserve. Very different, right? Additional to the long list of improvements, change the filter if you have a central air conditioned unit. If you have an old thermostat, get a smart reprogrammable thermostat where you can set your temperature to specific temperatures while you're out, at nighttime, daytime. It's a very small investment, $5, $10, $15. They're very inexpensive. The other thing is to use your air conditioner with a fan, right? You can set it to a lower, and then the fan will help to circulate the cold air. These are things that we have traditionally done before, right? So all we're saying is let's revisit some of these best practices, especially during the summer month, but we're not saying do without. Conserve. That is the message.
For Bahamas Grid, firstly, I just wanted you to confirm if the T&D assets have been officially transferred from BPL to Bahamas Grid.
Yeah. So where we stand with that right now is we're actively in the process of completing that process. It's a very complicated process. When assets has been owned for by one entity for several decades, there's a whole process that needs to be followed in order to finalize it. So we're very close to finalizing that. I hope that answers the question.
All right, that confirmed that. But is the company going to be seeking out a new strategic partner to replace Island, Grid, and Pike? Or have you started that process or not?
So to answer that question, let's talk about what was the role of Island Grid and what was the role of Pike, so that the Bahamian public can fully understand what their role was. Island Grid was the managing entity in BGC, right? It just so happens that the co-CEO for Island Grid, his name was Pike, who by all accounts had divested whatever holdings he might have had in Pike, the entity. So Island Grid, the managing services, they helped to manage and to stand up BGC as a company. That's what they did. The plan has always been to transition from Island Grid to a Bahamian-led and operated company. That is where me and Mr. Holder, we step in. And I've been appointed now as CEO for the past 3.5 months. Now let's talk about Pike. Two are separate. Pike provided subcontracting services in terms of the construction work on the grid. And that is why we would see them around the system with their trucks and so forth and so on. So that doesn't impact anything. We had a good transition from Island Grid to me and my team, and we are now effectively managing and building on the foundation that they put in place. There's a lot more work to be done, right? And there's a lot more opportunities for improvements. Those opportunities have been identified, and they will be addressed over time by the leadership team for Bahamas Grid. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you very much.
Then I'll take it on the side and make sure you answer.
Yes, we will. I know that reporters still have a few questions, and I hope that executives from BPL and BGC will be able to indulge them for a few minutes longer. But thank you very much. That brings our press briefing to an end. Thank you very much, everyone. Good afternoon.